Welcome to A More Beautiful World podcast with Susyn Renee, a place for those of us with the desire to expand our consciousness, tap into higher vibrations of love, and to connect into a community where together we can make the world a more beautiful place. I'm so eager to share with you what I've learned on my journey in discovering how we're all connected and how what we do for one, we do for us all. Here, I'll be sharing my own experiences, knowledge, and expertise for how you can heal, transform, and ascend your being so that together we can create the more beautiful world we all know is possible. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of A More Beautiful World. In today's episode, I'm going to be sharing my story on how things fell apart in my life and where I believe a big turning point of my healing began. I'm going to be sharing how heading into my own darkness and pain with the use of psychedelic mushrooms or psilocybin kickstarted a lot of things to fall apart in my life. And in this episode, I want you to understand how, in order to come back to the light and in order to get, into a healing process, we do have to travel through some darkness. And I want you to understand that we can't simply just mask our pain. We have to become aware of it and acknowledge it and feel it in order to, move through it and let it go and truly heal. So I hope in sharing part one of this story that you'll understand how plant medicine has guided me on my journey and how psilocybin specifically was a huge turning point for me to better myself so I can help make this world a more beautiful place. So let's begin. And I want to start with a quote today, and that is, "When things fall apart, they are actually coming together." I love that quote. But I want to ask you, do you believe this? Do you understand that things do need to fall apart in order for new things to come together? Can you see how this needs to happen? This is a hard statement, I feel like, for a lot of us to trust, though on my journey, I've certainly found it to be true. So, how do you keep it all together in your life when things are falling apart? And I believe that you do need to deeply stay connected into your why and build on your faith and trust that life is happening for you. So, as I go through and dig in and share my story today of how things really fell apart in my life, I want you to first connect into your why. What is your intention for being on this journey? And what is your intention for bettering yourself? Because again, I feel like when things are falling apart, and maybe we can't see yet that it means they're actually coming together. I think being able to stay connected into our why is such a huge part to help us move through the pain, move through the difficulties. So for me, my intention has always been to become, the strongest version of myself so I can really ultimately be of service to the world. I have a big calling to be of service as my purpose. And what I recognized on my own journey was that in order for that intention to become a reality, I really needed to become more aligned with who I am, more authentic, and more resilient. And in doing that, at the root of that, I needed to learn how to love myself unconditionally and truly rewire my brain and my way of being, to release the trauma and the self-limiting beliefs that have been holding me back. So knowing now that this has been my intention over the last several years, I think it's a good place to start the story. So for me, I'm going to share today how things in my life really fell apart and hitting probably one of the lowest points in my life, but how through that holding my intention and holding the vision of my healing, with holding that vision, the shit had to fall apart. It couldn't stay around. Um, so in part 2 of this story, I'm going to share how it all comes together. I promise there is a happy ending. Though for today, you get to hear how my life fell apart. Okay. So as I was outlining this episode, I realized there needs to be a little bit of context. Not all of you listening know my story, especially as well as I do. So I want you to understand kind of my journey a little bit, give you a little bit of context. And the things I'm going to share here, you could probably argue are all part of the things falling apart story. But I believe my journey really began with some intentional use of psilocybin in the fall of 2019. However, let me give you a little bit of background context for what was happening that led up to that. So I got divorced in June of 2017. And after I got divorced, depression set in, even though it was an amicable divorce in many ways, there was a lot of depression, there was a lot of pain. And it's when things like the panic attacks, the anxiety, the depression, depressed episodes all really started to rise in my life. And I got into kind of a chronic dating space where I was doing a lot of dating and, trying to find love, in all the wrong places. But spirit was guiding me at the time because I did connect with someone during that time who I could get some psychedelic mushrooms from. And really at the time, I was in this very depressed state. It was post-divorce. And I just thought, why not? In my marriage, I wasn't really allowed, or wasn't really looked highly upon me if I wanted to smoke cannabis or drink or do anything in that nature. So I kind of went into the state of rebellion post divorce, and I really got these mushrooms just to kind of like party, and have some good times and fun. Which is all fine. You are allowed to use, psychedelic mushrooms to have some fun, but they are true medicine as well. So initially, again, mushrooms come into my life more of a party thing. But what I had started to recognize during this time, so we're talking, 2017 in and through 2018, I was in this space of like chronic dating, looking for my next life partner, didn't want to be alone. And I noticed I wasn't really connecting with the vibration of men that I wanted to be with. And now I can look back and say, well, it was because I wasn't in my highest vibration of who I wanted to be. Right. So, it was coming into 2019. It was kind of summer of 2019. And I finally hit a big wall. And in this wall, I was now 2 years post divorce. I was suffering from a lot of panic attacks, a lot of anxiety, and a lot of depression. I kind of would swing back and forth between really depressed and really anxious and really depressed. And maybe I'd have a little bit of time in the middle, but not much. And I was waking up in the middle of the night with panic attacks, and it was really difficult. Now, I wasn't taking the best care of my body, mind, or spirit at that time, but I still I knew my why. Okay. But it was in that summer of 2019. I remember I was up at my old family cottage in Michigan that I truly and deeply got connected into my why. And I was looking back over the previous 2 years and I was over it. I was like, I cannot continue to be in this space. I'm never going to have the life I want. I'm never going to be who I'm meant to be. I'm never going to have the partner I'm meant to have. And so that summer, I set the intention to really heal a lot of the trauma that I had been through in my life. And I wanted to become the person I knew I was meant to be and become better so I could attract my dream partner. And I truly could find unconditional love for myself. And I could do great things with my business and in serving others and helping them heal. So it was in that fall, I still was in the dating scene, which was a total blessing in so many ways, because all of the partners I had were just great mirrors for this journey for me. And so enter in a man who we will just call him Ben for the sake of this discussion. And I met Ben, and he just was an awesome communicator. At that point, I hadn't met a lot of partners who were really good communicators. And I remember very soon on asking him about it. I was like, "You're really authentic. You're a great communicator. You know yourself so well. How do you do it?" And he connected me into a therapist, and gave me the referral for his therapist that he was using. And this therapist worked with EMDR therapy, which is a great therapy to help you rewire your brain and move through trauma. So with that, I was like, wow, that really called to me. So I made the therapist. I enter into therapy, and this is now fall of 2019. And the intention of therapy was to help me release trauma, um, move into a space of unconditional love for myself, but also move away from codependent relationships, and constantly giving of myself to others and being in a really people pleasing space. And also to recognize that I am enough and that I am worthy of love. And again, to really cultivate that deep unconditional love for myself. And I wanted to connect into the energy of realizing that I was enough, I was lovable, and that I didn't have to sacrifice myself or my own happiness to be in a relationship. So, Ben's out of the picture at this point. I met him, got his therapist, and we stopped dating. And then very soon after, I meet this guy. And for the sake of this discussion, we are going to call him Adam. And Adam was at the time, he like hit all of my checklists. I wasn't super clear on my checklist of my partner at that time, but he was handsome. He had a great job. He had a dog, and he was super fun. He loved the outdoors. So when I met him, I was like, all right, like I just started doing this work, and, this guy could really be the one. I saw myself like I could marry this man, I could have his babies, like all the things. None of that turned out with Adam, by the way, but he was, and this is where, I feel like spirit is always guiding us. Even though he was very much narcissistic and he had a lot of his own healing he needed to do, and really wasn't the vibration of a partner I needed for the long run. During this time in my journey in being in therapy and working through a lot of the healing I wanted to do, he turned out to be the absolute best mirror for me. He was the mirror that I needed to see my weaknesses in relationships and to see my opportunities for growth as well. So he became a great topic in therapy. And one of the things, he and I had some pretty deep discussions on a lot of different topics. And I remember at one point he told me not to be a doormat. And I was like, what the hell does that mean? And what he meant was to stop letting people walk all over me. And it helped me recognize that I was sacrificing myself and my happiness for others. So again, there was a lot of stuff that came out of that relationship. But again, I'm in this relationship that is with a narcissist, and perhaps even, I don't know, there were some other issues going on, some type B personality traits, I believe is what they call it. You can look that up. But anyway, he was not my long-term partner. But in therapy, he was helpful. And the EMDR process in therapy was also helpful, but it was painful and it was slow. I was reliving a lot of the trauma that I had been in. And I felt like I was like reopening up all of these wounds, and it was taking them forever to heal. So this time, again, kind of the end of 2019, into just the beginning of 2020. So kind of like the first 2 weeks or so of January, I was filled with a lot of depression. I was filled with a lot of anxiety, a lot of panic attacks. Those were still happening. Although my awareness around them had expanded because of therapy and, their root causes. But at the time, I was giving all of myself to this relationship. I was sacrificing my needs, sacrificing my work, sacrificing my friendships, only to, again, make this partner love me. All these topics, again, were really great for therapy, but I've finally realized that, enough is enough as all of this is going on. And this is the time that psilocybin and my relationship with it really changed. So again, I had been kind of using it as more of like a party, a party medicine. We'll call it a party. I don't want to say drug because I don't believe it is a drug, but I was using it to have a good time. All right. And to lift my mood up a little bit. But it was during this time when I'm in therapy, I'm in this painful relationship, I realized I wanted to use it as medicine because if there's one thing I love to do, it's research. And I love diving into medical journals and different research articles that talk about psilocybin and how it is medicine and how it can be used in therapy and how it can be used to rewire our brain and relieve anxiety and relieve depression. So in learning all of this, and knowing how much I needed it and being called by spirit to the fact I needed this, it's when my use of it changed. So I decided, with that, it was time to become intentional and get myself into what I called a psilocybin ceremony. So this was around the end of 2019. I went up to Sedona all by myself, out into nature with my psilocybin mushrooms with the intention to release what was no longer serving me. I probably will do a whole episode on the power of intention because it's important we be clear on our intentions. But this was a really painful journey. And again, up until this time, I'd been using psilocybin more for fun. And it was kind of always uplifting and all good stuff. This was a difficult trip. This was a difficult ceremony. So here I am going up out into the wilderness down in Oak Creek in Sedona, one of the places I feel very safe. I feel very connected to. But I'm alone. It is late fall, almost winter time, and it does get cold up there. So I'm out solo in nature, in the cold, no leaves on the trees, and it's cloudy that day on top of it, and it's windy. And anytime I do anything in the plant medicine space, I tend to get very cold. So here I am, cold, it's windy, it's cloudy. I'm on mushrooms. I'm deep in a journey, and I'm just going out there to release what no longer serves me. So this led me into a lot of dark places in my soul. I felt so vulnerable and so unsafe out there, and not unsafe to the fact of like someone's going to come and hurt me or anything like that. It was in a very safe area. But I felt exposed. I felt raw. I felt sad. I felt unsafe in my emotions. And I felt really alone. And as I was trying to, just like get comfortable and sit with the medicine, I remember just connecting in and feeling into all of the pain that I had, all of the loneliness, all of the punishment, all of the self-hatred. And I remember crying, and I just cried for myself and because I saw how much I had been hurting myself and how much I had just been not caring for myself and how much I had sacrificed myself and my energy and my time and my money and all the things for everybody else and hating myself the whole time for it. And this was really the first time I had gone into the darkness and looked at my pain and connected to the fact that I wanted to heal it. So again, my intention was to release what no longer was serving me, but this ceremony was what connected me into what that actually was. I had kind of an idea of it, but I had never really felt it. And here I am out in nature, cold and alone, feeling just awful emotionally. And I connected into this pain and again was able to cry through it and connect into it and recognize I don't want to feel that way anymore. And I remember I was trying to bring up my vibration at that ceremony, and I even tried to play some uplifting music, and my cell phone couldn't even get connection out there. So I don't know. Maybe that was the universe's way of telling me I had to just be with it and sit with it and feel through it, before I could heal it. I don't know. Um, but I also had a lot of realizations that day about the partner that I was soon to not be with, but still was with at the time of my ceremony. And also had a lot of visions about my lack of community and my lack of connection. And I realized that even though I was in a relationship, I was incredibly lonely. And when I was married, I felt very lonely. Um, and I remember after divorce, I promised myself to never be in a relationship again where I felt lonely. And as I was feeling lonely and realizing this lack of community, this lack of connection to others, and feeling so lonely in this relationship, I had this vision download of seeing myself as like a flame on a candle. And I was exposed to the wind, and I was just dwindling, and my flame could not burn, and it could not burn bright because I didn't have the protection. I didn't have the connection, the community, the sacred partner that was helping to hold space for me to, to heal and to be vibrant and to burn, for my flame and my passion to truly burn. And I was so exposed, I was just constantly being blown out. So I see myself as this candle, this little flickering flame, and I just see it keep flickering low and being blown out. And that really stuck with me. And so soon thereafter, after the ceremony, which as soon as I could, I hightailed it out of Sedona, went right into my car, drove right down the hill back to Phoenix, where luckily it was sunny and I warmed up and I got to move through some of the difficulties of the day, had a really good meal. Um, and so soon thereafter, the ceremony, I did end the relationship, and I started on the journey into more self love and into more unconditional love. Um, I stopped dating. I kind of made it a point, just I'm going to get off all the dating apps. And I remember that Valentine's Day, I did this wonderful woman's retreat in self love, which was so amazing. And also during this time, I joined a fitness studio and started getting excited about getting a regular yoga practice going to help me work through the trauma. And it's when I, was really ready, I think, to make some life changes. And so just when I'm ready to make all these changes and I'm starting to build momentum, the final nail in the coffin hit for my life to fall apart. And that was the COVID pandemic. Because just as I was beginning to grow and flourish, I overnight lost all my business, all my income. Yoga studio closed, couldn't go and do yoga. I became super isolated because of that. Not seeing clients, not seeing, friends at yoga. And everybody's in fear. Nobody wants to go out and do anything. And so I fell into a really deep depression and hit rock bottom. I had just come, off of this little bit of momentum I was building to do great things. And then COVID hits, a life completely turns on its head. And I got into a habit of drinking every day and smoking multiple joints a day. And I was just basically partying every day, but it wasn't even happy partying. It was like sad, pity partying. pity party partying. That's a mouthful. But it wasn't even a good time. I was sad. I was depressed. It was not a happy time at all. And after about, I don't know, 3 to 4 weeks of this, I just couldn't do it anymore. And I remember I was doing some journaling and I reflected back onto that last ceremony with psilocybin up in Sedona and how I had set that intention to let go of what no longer serves me. And I looked at how everything had kind of cascaded up into that point and how so much had been thrown in my face. And I realized this was the moment. I looked at that ceremony and reflected back on it and realized how I was living, partying every day, drinking every day, smoking pot every day. That wasn't who or how I wanted to be. I realized that this was the moment I had the opportunity to step out of all of these patterns and, that I've been living in and become who I was meant to be and who I truly desired and wanted to be. So this was, again, really big turning point because it was my rock bottom. Literally everything at that point had fallen apart. My health had become an absolute mess. I wasn't in any relationship. My business had crumbled, and I had no community. It was like boom, 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 all the things, just nothing. So it was at this moment, again, in hitting rock bottom. It was probably about April ish, maybe end of April, beginning of May in 2020. And it was at this moment I decided to end therapy. Again, the EMDR process was painful. And I decided to dedicate myself to more frequent psilocybin ceremonies and make some sustainable changes in my life to move through this time in my life, to move through these painful moments, heal and release the pain, and really begin to embody and align with the version of myself that I truly wanted to be. So these ceremonies, they play a big role in our journeys if you choose, to open to them and if they really call to you. I don't think that psilocybin or ayahuasca or bufo or MDMA or any of the things that we'll be talking about are meant for everyone. I think you've got to be really open to doing the work. And these ceremonies can play a big role in a healing process. But it's not just the ceremony, it is the integration afterwards and remembering the lessons and the visions that you had in those ceremonies and taking them forward in your world. We'll probably do a deeper dive on integrations in future episodes too, especially as we talk about my ayahuasca retreats. But for this episode, there was my life falling apart. I journeyed into the sacred, beautiful space in Sedona to have a powerful ceremony with psilocybin to, release all the things that had no longer been serving me. And really, in all of that time, all that wasn't working in my world was falling apart. And remember, when things are falling apart, they are actually coming together. There's actually, quick note, a wonderful book called When Things Fall Apart. Subtitle is Difficult Advice for Hard Times, I believe. Pima Chondran is the author. Fantastic book on the topic if anybody is interested. But that was my falling apart bottom. And so I wanted to share part one of this story today because from here, again, this is when I really went on the journey that I think has gotten me to where I am today. I mean, it's all a journey. All 36 years of my existence have gotten me to where I'm at. But it was the turning point of one really powerful psilocybin ceremony and then allowing all the things to fall apart and then choosing to move forward with more ceremonies to get, again, into more alignment with myself, to embody who I know I am meant to be. that is all going to be shared in part 2 of this story. And that's where I'm going to be sharing with you guys how things were actually coming together for me and how they have been continuing to come together since then. So, as I wrap up this episode, before we move into part 2 of this story, I ask you to connect this into your own life. If you've noticed difficulty or, big changes, big things falling away in your life, if you feel like things have been falling apart in your life, could it actually be because they are coming together? So I'm going to leave you there because this is already a longer episode. Next episode, we'll talk about again how things come together for me with the use of psilocybin. And until then, tribe, I hope you all have a great week. And until next time, much love to you all, tribe. Hey, tribe, thank you so much for watching. If you liked this podcast, make sure to like the video below and then click subscribe so you never miss an episode. And remember, I've got lots of free resources available to you to support your healing, transformation, and ascension so you can help in making this a more beautiful world for us all. Make sure you check them out in the description below. Thanks again for tuning in, tribe. And until next time, much love to you all.